Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, trashy books. I want to give you a tour of the Garb August Garbingo card. So, Garb August, as you hopefully know, is my month-long reading event running through the month of August where we celebrate trashy books. And by trashy books, I mean books that are sensational, books that cash in on something that's in the public mind at the time, but not necessarily books that are bad. So trashy books can be absolutely wonderful. What I wanted to do today is talk through the weekly prompts for Garb August, and also in particular the Garb August Garbingo card, which I touched on in my announcement video for Garb August, but didn't go into depth on. And I promised I'd do another video where I came back and talked a bit more about that. Apologies if you could hear banging in the background. My neighbours are having some work done on their house, which seems to be going on forever, and I needed to get this filmed. So apologies for any banging you might hear. Although maybe banging is appropriate for Garb August. Right. So before I start with the bingo card, just a couple of bits of I suppose Garb August housekeeping. So firstly. One of the things I did last year for Garb August, which was fantastic, which was probably my favourite thing about Garb August, was to really involve viewers as well as other booktubers in it. And the way we did that was I did a Happy Garb August video, which I put up on the 1st of August, and I invited anybody who wanted to send in a clip of themselves saying Happy Garb August. So that's all you have to do, is just film yourself saying Happy Garb August, and I will edit all of those clips together into one video, and I'll link to the original Happy Garb August video in the description for this one, so you can see what I mean. So also in the description for this will be a link to a Google folder, like a Google Drive folder, where you can go and upload your video. And as I say, all you need to do is say Happy Garb August. If you want to add a bit more, you're more than welcome to, but you just need to say Happy Garb August. So that's the first bit of admin out of the way. The second thing is that Kelsey from the channel Slime and Slashers, or Slimy Splashers as she is for Garb August, who is absolutely fantastic at stuff like this, has created some Garb August stickers. So Garb August stickers, there's an online store that you can go and buy them from. They've got the cute Garb August logo that Kelsey designed. So again, there'll be a link in the description to the video for that, should you want to get yourself some Garb August stickers. And I'll also put a link to a folder where Kelsey has put like printable versions of like the Garb August bingo card and things like that. So you can access all of that material should you want to. Okay, moving on then. So just a quick reminder of the 4 weekly prompts. So the first week is either category romance or men's adventure. I've got a huge stack, so I forgot to say, I suspect this video is going to be really chaotic, even by my standards, because I've got my iPad I need to refer to, I've got my laptop I need to refer to, and I've got a huge stack of books that I need to pluck books from. And I think I normally try and put books in the right order, and I haven't managed to do that this time. So the books are all over the place. Right, so first week then is category romance or men's adventure. What do we mean by category romance? We mean books that are so typically published by either Harlequin or Mills and Boon, or they don't have to be, but books that are romance books that fit into specific categories within the romance genre. So for example, I've got some like suspense, romantic suspense type stuff here from Mills and Boon. So we've got Texas Bodyguard Luke. This is a Mills and Boon Heroes double. So we've got Texas Bodyguard Luke and Danger on Maui. So those both look pretty fantastic. So that's a good example of category romance. Or the other option for week 1 is men's adventure. What do I mean by men's adventure? So long-running series like The Executioner that are, well, they don't have to be long-running, but typically series like The Executioner that are action adventure type things. So The Executioner is a great example. The Survivalist is another one that I really like. I've got some other examples here. So I've got a Professionals novel. So The Professionals was a UK TV series in the 80s. So that will be another example of men's adventure. Week 2 then, paperbacks from hell, so vintage horror stuff like this, Stage Fright by Garrett Boatman. Doesn't need to be an official paperback from hell in that it doesn't need to have been featured in Grady Hendrix and Will Erickson's Paperbacks from Hell book, but just, you know, kind of trashy vintage horror, or vintage smut. So vintage smut might be something like The Bigamist by William Hegner, so an older book, and by vintage we mean probably... We had a bit of a debate amongst the Garb August hosts about what was vintage, and it all made us feel very old, but probably pretty much anything from the last century, I think we decided probably counted. But the more vintage, the better. So this definitely looks smutty and is definitely vintage. Then we've got week 3, which can be novelisations or books by famous people. So novelisation, so The Professionals would be an example of a novelisation. So this is a book based on episodes of the TV show. I did find some other novelisations, and they're in my stack of books somewhere. Here we go. So Strange Behaviour is based on a movie which was titled either Strange Behaviour or Dead Kids, depending on where you were in the world. So that would be another example of a novelisation. Or you can do like a tie-in book for this. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a novelisation of a specific movie, but there are loads of series now that are set in the universe of movies. So like set in the Aliens universe or the Predator universe or like the Star Trek universe or whatever. The other option for week 3 is a book by a famous person. So I've got here When She Was Bad by Kate O'Mara. So Kate O'Mara was a British actress who appeared in appeared in some of the old Hammer horror movies, also in some soap operas. I think she was in Dynasty for a while. So yeah, in various different things. A fantastic actress, not such a good novelist. I have read this, albeit years ago, but yeah, I'm going to dive into this one again for Garb August, I think. And then the final week is Anything Goes. So you can read anything you want as long as it's trashy, and really that is the overarching rule, if you like. If there's one rule for Garb August, it's just read something trashy. So don't worry if you don't want to get into the weekly prompts. Don't worry about the weekly prompts. If you don't want to get into the Garbingo card, don't worry about the Garbingo card. These things are more to give you a bit of a guide as to kind of trashy genres and subgenres and things like that you might want to check out, rather than something you have to do. So I think the unofficial slogan for Garb August would be read trashy books and chill. So just relax and read some trash. Right, let's get into the Garbingo card then. So there are 25 squares on the Garbingo card, so I'm going to try and go through all of them. And what I'm going to try and do, and I haven't managed to do this for all of them, but for most of them, I'm going to talk about a book that either I've read or I've got on my shelves to read, and then I've also got a pick from Kindle Unlimited. So there is loads of trashy stuff on Kindle Unlimited, both recent stuff and also vintage stuff that's being republished. And it's a great way to take part in reading events like this without having to go out and buy books, especially assuming you've already got a Kindle Unlimited subscription. So the most important square on the bingo card is obviously the Pax square at the centre. So Pax was one of the hosts for Garb August last year. Sadly, she is no longer with us. So that square is dedicated to her, and the whole of Garb August this year is in her memory. And we will be doing, as I've said already, a group read of The Devil's Laughter by William W. Johnston, which is one of the books that Pax read last year. And I'll put a list in the description for the video of all the books she read last year. So in order to tick off the Pax square on the Garbingo card, either read a book she read last year or read a book with green on the cover. So I've got a ton of books with green on the cover here. So Truesdale Exit. I've also got this one, which hasn't got green on the cover, but it's got green edges to the pages, so I think that will count. So hopefully a nice easy square for people to tick off. Right, let's go through the rest of the squares then. So first square is a Jackie Collins book. So Jackie Collins, obviously, very popular author, less so nowadays perhaps, but in the 80s in particular, absolutely huge. I read Hollywood Wives by her last year and really, really enjoyed it. A hugely enjoyable, very trashy read with all sorts of stuff going on in it. I've got The Stud by her as well, which I aim to try and read this year. Now, Jackie Collins's books are not available on Kindle Unlimited, sadly, but I did check, and there is a Jackie Collins on Kindle Unlimited. It's just not the Jackie Collins, but it does look like she writes books which are quite trashy, dare I say it. So the one that caught my eye was called Kiss of a Wolf, which is a paranormal romance. So you might want to check that out. And that will count. That will count, even though she's not the Jackie Collins. You can tick off the square if you read a book by the other Jackie Collins. Right, next one then is Killer Kids. Strange Behaviour actually has killer kids, or killer teenagers at least. The one I wanted to talk about though was Let's Go Plant the Adams by Mendel Johnson. So this was originally this is considered to be a paperback from hell. And this is a great example of a book that I think you can legitimately call trashy, in that it's very sensational, particularly in its marketing. And you can see, this UK cover is terribly trashy, but it's a genuinely excellent book. I think this is an absolutely fantastic book. Very disturbing, very grueling, not necessarily something you'd want to read for Garb August if you're after a fun read, but a good example of a book which is both trashy and excellent. From the Kindle Unlimited side of things, I did have a look through, and there's definitely some kind of vintage Killer Kids type horror on there. But the one that caught my eye was a book by Johnny Cassidy called Killer Kids, 10 Children Who Killed Their Parents. So I think there's something inherently trashy about true crime stuff, which is what this is. And, clearly there is some true crime which is, very well researched and well written and things like that. But also there's a lot of true crime which just exploits, real life human misery, which I think is quite a trashy thing to do. I suspect that Killer Kids, 10 Children Who Killed Their Parents probably falls into that latter category. Okay, next square then, Sexy Vampires. So one I read a little while ago, which is definitely a sexy vampire book and is pretty good, is Live Girls by Ray Garton, which is, I think, an 80s American horror novel set in a kind of sleazy Times Square area of New York, or sleazy as it was in the 80s. So that's a good one. There's loads of sexy vampire stuff on Kindle Unlimited, as you might expect. The one that caught my eye was Taken by the Vampire King, an Enemies to Lovers paranormal romance by Roxy Ray and Lindsay Devin. So that's one you might want to sample from Kindle Unlimited, but you are sport for choice in terms of sexy vampires there. Next up then, a dirty book. So I've got a lot of dirty books in front of me here. So I've got Dirty Movies by Herbert Castle, the aforementioned The Bigamist, which I now can't find, but which is here somewhere. So, there are lots of options for dirty books, and clearly that could also be used for your vintage smut week if you're doing the weeks as well as the bingo card. In terms of Kindle Unlimited, again, there's a lot of dirty books on Kindle Unlimited, many of which are very short. So there's a lot of erotic short stories. So I'm sure you will find something entertaining on Kindle Unlimited should you need a bit of smut. Right, moving on then, Richard Lehman. So I've read tons of Richard Lehman books over the years. One that I've been reading for a while and haven't finished yet is Dreadful Tales, which is a short story collection. So Richard Lehman was an American horror author, particularly big in the 80s, and unusually someone who had a lot more success in the UK and Europe than he did in America at the time for various reasons. Writes very sexualized books. So the typical criticism of Lehman is he writes like a teenage boy. So lots of descriptions of the female anatomy, very trashy, but he is, he does turn out quite enjoyable B-movie style horror books as well. So worth checking out. There are some Richard Lehman books on Kindle Unlimited, so many of them like this aren't on Kindle Unlimited. But his daughter, after his death, has started republishing on Kindle Unlimited some of the books that they, as a family, own the rights to, rather than the publisher having. The Woods Are Dark, which is one of his first books, for example, is available in a kind of expanded, uncut edition. You've also got a romance book that he wrote, which I'm going to try and read for Garb August this year, called Your Secret Admirer. So that's another Richard Lehman you might want to check out. Okay, next square then is a book with more than 100 entries. So there's a few to choose from here. So the Executioner, there's over 400 entries in the Executioner series. You've also got the Long Arm series by Tabor Evans. So this is actually a crossover book, but there are, again, hundreds of books in the Long Arm series. And indeed, I think in the Lone Star series. So this is a Long Arm Lone Star crossover. I did try and find some books with some series with more than 100 books on Kindle Unlimited, and failed to. Now, there was a series that I read the first couple of books of, called, I think, Shade of a Vampire by an author called Bella Forrest, which was on Kindle Unlimited, and that got up to, I think, book 92. But when I looked, it's not on Kindle Unlimited anymore. And you know, when I read them a few years ago, it was already into kind of the 80s or 90s. So it definitely would have got up to the hundreds, I suspect, if it was still on Kindle Unlimited. But it looks like there's been some sort of dispute between Bella Forrest and the people who were actually writing her books. And by the sound of it, there's some sort of legal dispute between her and one of her ghostwriters. And therefore, all of her books are unavailable at the moment. But yeah, so if you know a series on Kindle Unlimited that's got more than 100 books, do please let me know in the comments, because I'll be interested in reading it. I was hoping to dip into the Shade of a Vampire series again, but sadly not able to. Right, next up then, we have A Shifter Romance. So let's do Kindle Unlimited first. There are tons of shifter romances on Kindle Unlimited, like tons and tons. And I read one last year called Bronze Dragon, which was quite entertaining. Although the thing that frustrated me a bit, or maybe not frustrated, surprised me a bit or disappointed me a bit about that book was the fact that the shifter character, and it's almost always the men who are the shifters in these shifter romances, only has sex when he's in human form. So I was hoping for some dragon sex, but there was none. So Shifter Romance is huge on Kindle Unlimited. I was trying to think of a mainstream Shifter Romance book and struggled a bit. So do please let me know if you can think of any. I guess Twilight would count. So I guess Twilight would count as a Shifter Romance in that you've got male characters who are both human and inhuman, and there's a romantic element. Okay, next then, nudity on the cover. So I've shown a few already. So Dirty Movies would be one. What else have I got here? John Adams' Samurai has got a little bit of nudity there, and it felt like certainly in the 70s. I think the majority of books had nudity on the cover. Certainly I remember my parents having a lot of books with nudity on the cover, which intrigued me enormously as a child. It's much less common nowadays. And when I looked on Kindle Unlimited, there are definitely books with obscured nudity on the cover, but not the kind of full-on nudity that you might have got in the 70s. Here's another one actually, the Scoundrel Goddess by William Hegner. Where again it's slightly obscured, but I certainly remember books from the 70s that had full-on boobs on the cover. Okay, next up then, gangs. So I've got a recent pickup here, The Shrewsdale Exit by John Buell, which I think is about a biker gang, so looking forward to reading that. I also read Hell's Angels, so that in the 70s there are quite a few kind of Hell's Angels type books published, one of which I read last year. On Kindle Unlimited, I did look for books about gangs, and they all seem to be erotica. So I'm sure there are other gang-type books on Kindle Unlimited, but there's certainly lots of smutty gang-type books. Okay, next up then, a book with Satanists. So I'm going to go a bit rogue here and suggest a book which some people might be offended by me calling a trashy book, and that is Rosemary's Baby by R11. So it's another book that I think is a genuinely excellent book, but I think in terms of the subject matter and the marketing of it and the fact that it tapped into public fears about Satanism at the time, and that whole kind of re-evaluation of Christianity that went on in the 70s. I think that is definitely a trashy book, albeit, as I say, a fantastic one. In terms of Kindle Unlimited, there's a few different things out there. One that I've been meaning to read for a while is the Satan Sleuth series by Michael Avallone, the first of which is Fallen Angel, which looks like a lot of fun. So this is a series about a kind of occult detective character going up against Satanists. Next up then, conspiracy theories. And I think in this you can include any kind of wacky theory. It doesn't necessarily need to be a conspiracy theory, but so things like cryptids and Bigfoot and things like that, I think count for that as well. On that note, a couple of Bigfoot recommendations. So you've got Devolution by Max Brooks, which I read a little while ago, which is a really fun Bigfoot novel. You've also got The Spirit by Thomas Page, which is a paperback from hell, so you could use that for the paperbacks from hell week as well. And then from the Kindle Unlimited side, there is tons of conspiracy theory stuff on Kindle Unlimited. Search for UFOs or things like that and you will find a wealth of stuff. I did also find some kind of books about climate change, which I suspect are not that scientifically accurate. The one that really caught my eye in terms of the title was a book by an author called Wayne C. Weeks, which is called the Global Warming Climate Change Hoax, Fraud, Lies and Deception and Threats Are the Tools of the Global Warming Climate Change Hoax Folks. I managed to get all of that out. So yeah, that one looks interesting. Right, moving on then, a book with a vigilante. So the classic one for this, and I do think this is a trashy book, albeit again a good book, is Death Wish by Brian Garfield, which is a great thriller, but definitely trashy. And a series that's on Kindle Unlimited, which I did enjoy. I read a few years ago. I think there's 4 books in the series, and they're available in one volume on Kindle Unlimited. Is the Jury series by Lee Goldberg. So Lee Goldberg is a really interesting independent author who also has written for TV. So wrote episodes of things like Diagnosis Murder and Monk, but has got a load of books on Kindle Unlimited too. The Jury series is one he wrote, I think, in the early 80s originally, and it was originally published under the title 357 Vigilante, which I think is a much better title than the Jury series. It's really sleazy though, so warning, it's fun, but it's really gritty and sleazy at times. Right, moving on then, a book with a step back cover. So step back covers you just don't see anymore, which is a real shame, and I think it's evidence of publishers trying to cut costs, but they are a wonderful thing. So this is what we mean by a step back cover. So this is The Bog by Michael Talbot. So you can see what appears to be the cover, but then when you open the cover, there's actually another cover inside. So wonderfully done with that little cutout. Now, sadly, clearly on Kindle Unlimited, you can't do step back covers. But I'm sure there are some books that originally had step back covers, which are now available on Kindle Unlimited. Next then, a book with a cigarette ad. So somewhere in front of me, I've got one of those. Actually, I've got a couple of those because I think one of the William Hegner books had one. Sorry, this is where it starts getting chaotic because I've just got too many books in front of me. So the Executioner book has got one. So we've got an advert for Kent cigarettes in there. And I do think, and I've said this before, I do think, here we go, here's the Hegner book. So we've got an ad for Newport cigarettes there. I do think, putting an advert inside a book for something which is literally going to kill your readers is definitely trashy. Again, like the step back cover, you cannot get cigarette ads in Kindle Unlimited books. Now, having said that, if Kindle Unlimited had been around in the 70s, I have no doubt that Amazon would have been happy to put cigarette ads in their books. Right, moving on then, we have got a book with an exclamation mark in the title. So there's a Richard Lehman book called Beware! Exclamation mark. So that would definitely count for this one. And there are others as well. I did try and find a book on Kindle Unlimited with an exclamation mark in the cover, but if you just search for exclamation mark on Kindle Unlimited, you don't get anything. So yeah, let me know if you can find one. I'd be interested to see other people's books with exclamation marks. Okay, next up, a book based on a video game, and I don't think I've read any books based on video games. I definitely had at least one of the Halo books at some point, but never got around to reading it. I have read some of the Warhammer 40k books though, like this, The Saint by Dan Abnett. So books based on a board game rather than a video game, although there are Warhammer video games as well, so maybe that does count. In terms of Kindle Unlimited options, the one that amused me most was a book that I think Crystal from Fibre Artsy, or Fibertati as she is at this time of year, read last year, which is Taken by the Tetris Blocks by Leonard Delaney. So an erotic short story about a woman having fun with Tetris blocks. Right, let's move swiftly on. So a book you would be ashamed to read in public. So many of the books I have shown, I think John Adams Samurai I'd probably be okay with in public. Dirty Movies by Herbert Castle maybe less so. In terms of Kindle Unlimited, well, I think this is where Kindles come into their own, isn't it? Because when you're reading a book on Kindle, nobody has any idea what you're reading. So you could be reading the filthiest smut imaginable on the bus, and none of your fellow passengers would be any the wiser. And maybe that's why erotica and shifter romances and things like that are so prevalent on Kindle, because people can read them in secret. Moving on then, next one is a book set in a hospital. So I've got a rather wonderful vintage paperback here, which similar to some of the other books I've shown, was sent to me a while ago by one of my subscribers, Eerie B. So this is Celebrity Sweet Nurse by Suzanne Roberts, which I'm definitely going to read this Garb August. It looks a lot of fun. There are loads of doctor type romances on Kindle Unlimited. Just search for doctor and you will find plenty of them. I did find one called where did I put it? Called Bitten by the Doctor. Which is from the Aspen Ridge Pack Shifter MD series, so a shifter doctor romance. Okay, Killer Animals. I've got tons of Killer Animals books. I love Killer Animals books. What have we got in front of me here? So I've got Alligator by Shelley and Paul M. Katz. I've got, bear with me, this is where it starts getting messy. Right, so I've got a few by John Halkin. So Slither, which is about kind of shiny worms which kill people but which also get made into handbags. So that's quite a fun one. Bloodworm, which I haven't read yet but which appears to be about a giant worm. And Slime by Halkin, which is about killer jellyfish. And then perhaps my favourite of all, Slugs by Sean Hudson, which is absolutely phenomenal. So in terms of Kindle Unlimited is a wonderful place to find indie horror, and there's a lot of indie horror about killer animals. One that caught my eye, which Michelle from the channel Michelle's Melancholia read a while ago, is Snow Shark by Brian Berry, which looks absolutely fantastic. The sequel to Snow Shark is like, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's like Snow Shark in space basically. So those both look very, very entertaining. Next one then, Jilly Cooper. So I've never read a Jilly Cooper book. I've got, I think I've got Riders, which is like her classic on my Kindle. So I might try and read that for Garb August. But it is a long book. It's like, several hundred pages. So maybe I'll give that a try. Sadly, no Jilly Cooper on Kindle Unlimited, and no other Jilly Cooper on Kindle Unlimited either. Okay, moving on then, a book from a weirdly specific subgenre. And again, this is where Kindle Unlimited kind of really comes into its own in terms of there being loads of books which have, like really long subtitles that describe exactly what the book is about. So one of them, so that book Bronze Dragon, which is by an author called Sansa Moon, which I read last year, is a baby billionaire shifter romance. So, these are all subgenres of romance fiction. So there are, there's loads of romances about billionaires. There's loads of romances about like accidental babies. So, a couple meet at the start of the book. They get jiggy with it, and a baby is the result of that. And you know, typically the female character has to decide whether or not she wants to tell the guy and that kind of thing. And then shifter romance is another thing. So Bronze Dragon ties together 3 different types of romance into one package. And it was reasonably entertaining despite the lack of dragon sex. So next up then, a book that cashes in on a moral panic. So I've got Skinhead by Richard Allen here, which I've read, which is, I mean, it's kind of a horrible book, but it's also quite interesting. So cashing in on the public fascination with and fear of skinheads in the UK in the 70s. So that's definitely worth a look. I was looking on Kindle Unlimited and trying to find books that fell into this category, and I think the area where there are tons of books on Kindle Unlimited, like the shifter romances and things like that, I suppose almost the male equivalent is books about special forces agents who are lone wolves going up against terrorists. So that kind of cashing in on the war on terror, and also at times the war on drugs. So there are tons of books on Kindle Unlimited like that. Okay, so next up, a book published under a pseudonym. So loads of trashy books published under pseudonyms. Ken Blake is a pseudonym. Richard Allen is a pseudonym. Don Pendleton, whose name is on the cover of the Executioner books, only wrote the first 30 or so. The rest of them were all written by other authors. So pseudonyms very, very common in trashy books, and there are loads of examples out there. And similarly on Kindle Unlimited, you know, Sansa Moon, who apparently wrote that Bronze Dragon book, Sansa Moon doesn't sound like a real name to me. It sounds like it might be a made-up name. And that Shifter MD book I mentioned is by an author called Luna Wilder, which 100% is not her real name. And then finally then, the V.C. Andrews Square. So V.C. Andrews, the queen of trashy books. I've read the Dollenganger books, the Flowers and the Attic books, which are fantastic. Very trashy, but fantastic. Also, if you want a standalone, My Sweet Audrina by her, I really enjoyed, albeit it is troubling in some ways, as many of her books are. Flowers in the Attic is actually available on Kindle Unlimited as well in the UK. I did look on Amazon US, and it doesn't look like any of her books are available over there, sadly. Also, a good example of a pseudonymous author, in that whilst V.C. Andrews wrote her first few books, she then sadly passed away, and the vast majority of the books with V.C. Andrews on the cover were actually written by a guy called Andrew Needleman. Okay, so that's the Garb August Garbingo card gone through. Hopefully that was useful. As I said at the start, do not feel any obligation to tick off all of the squares or even any of the squares. It's just designed to give you some suggestions of the kind of things you might want to read for Garb August. The focus of Garb August really is just read some trashy books and have some fun. So I will leave it there because we've got on long enough, and say thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.